Hey guys, it's Jacob from TCG Buzz, and I'm here to show you guys my Black Dragon stall deck that I recently used in a match against Christian. There were some requests to see our decks. Christian's already done his deck profile. You can find a link to that in the description below. And I thought, well, it's my turn. So we're going to start off with my flag, Darkness Dragon World. Yes, and it's a very lovely, shiny flag. And then my buddy is Annihilation Black Death Dragon Abygale. We'll get into what it does when the card comes up in the deck itself. So here's the deck, and I'm going to take it back here out of screen and just show you the cards individually. So the first card we have is Black Dragon Dubie. This is a one of in the deck at this moment. I may end up adjusting it later on to be more because it's a pretty solid card. It's a size 0. And it has a very interesting skill. A once per turn skill that when this card is destroyed, you can pay 1 gauge if you have a Black Dragon with set. Pay 1 gauge and draw 2 cards. Just a really nice ability, and it combos really well with some of the other cards in the deck. Our next and only other size 0 is this guy here. This is Black Dragon Luarl. This is a 2 of in the deck, and when it deals damage to the opponent, you get to gain a life. So, not the greatest card ever, but it's life gain, which is important for this deck, and there are very few times your opponent's actually going to nullify the attack. So, it's quite nice. I mean, it only does 1 damage, so the opponent's probably not going to nullify it, so you can almost guarantee yourself a life gain. And our next card. We have 4 copies. Let's get those all set. Of our buddy, Annihilation Black Death Dragon Abygale, size 1, 621, with a 1 gauge call cost. All black dragons with set on your field cannot be destroyed or returned to hand by card effects, which is just nice because you get to protect them. We'll get to why that's important later. And then, when this card enters the field or is destroyed, destroy a monster on your opponent's field. So this is really nice. When you call him, you just get to destroy something on the field. But what I like to do is I like to use certain cards in the deck to counter call him during my opponent's turn. That way, he enters the field, he destroys one of their monsters, and then they attack him, if I put him in center, to destroy him, and I get to destroy another one of their monsters on their turn. All around, just a nice, solid card. Next, we have 2 copies of Purple Rag of Ruin Abygale. This card is very interesting and one of the newer additions to the deck. I'm still playtesting with it. So I might actually switch it out for a different Abygale, which gains gauge. I'm considering it, but for now, this is what I have. It's a 6/2/1 for 1 gauge, just like the other one. When this card enters the field, you gain 2 life, which is just fabulous. Why would you not want to gain 2 life? And its second skill. At the end of your turn, if you have a Black Dragon with set on the field, destroy a card on your opponent's field. I have 1 secret, 1 rare art. That kind of bugs me, but what am I going to do about it right now? I think it's a really solid card. It is a bit slower than I like, and the destruction won't always go off or won't always be useful on it, but just being able to destroy a card instead of a monster is very nice. Next, we have one of the more interesting cards this deck has to offer. This is a size 1, the last size 1 in the deck. It's a 4 of Black Crest Dragon Estryber. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. It's a 1/2/3, and its skill is rather interesting. At the beginning of your final phase, put up to 1 Black Dragon set from your drop zone into your hand, and you gain 1 life. So the fun thing I like to do with this guy, first thing, you're gaining a life every turn from him, as long as he's on the field. And then with his skill, I like to charge one of my extra set cards if I get them, and then pay out the gauge with them, with that card, and then immediately bring it back into my hand and do this over and over again as a chain. So I'm essentially never losing cards from hand for my charge and draw. It's kind of fun. And of course, it can also bring back your impact. We'll get to that if it ends up in the drop zone for some reason. Next, we have one of the crucial lifelines of the deck. This is Zillowest. He's a 4-of, trying to make them look nice, but whatever. Zillowest has an on-call skill, he's a size 2. With an on-call skill that you pay 2 gauge, search your deck for a Black Dragon set, and add it to your hand. Just a nice solid card for getting out not only your impact, which is your win condition for the deck, but if you already have that, this deck runs several different set spells that are very, very useful, and you can toolbox them out with him. The 2 gauge cost for the skill is a little high, but you can live with it. It's worth it. Next, we have our only other size 2 in the deck. We have 2 copies of Black Demon Swordsman Vader, totally not meant to be Darth Vader. A 4/2/2 size 2 for 1 gauge. When this card enters the field, you may call a size 1 or less Black Dragon from your drop zone by paying its call cost, and he has move. So your targets from him will probably just be your buddy Abygale in most cases. There are a couple other shenanigans you can play, but that's the biggest target for his skill. The thing with it is there is another card coming out relatively soon that is essentially a better version of him for this deck, that instead of using the skill on call, it's when this card is destroyed, and it also draws you a card, and I will most likely be replacing him with that card once it's out. That is it for monsters. I'm running probably a few right now, but I'm still working on the deck. Next, we have 4 items. Well, 4 copies of 1 item. We have Sickle of Slaughter, Gale Hawken. This is a 1000 power, 0 critical item, and it costs 1 gauge to equip. And this card can attack even if you have a monster in your center. And its skill: all Black Dragons set on your field cannot be destroyed, nor returned to hand by your opponent's card effects. Then, the souls of those cards cannot be placed into the drop zone by your opponent's card effects. This is really important just for keeping your Black Dragon set spells alive, especially the souls, and we'll get into that. Its other skill: when this card attacks a monster, destroy one of those monsters. Kind of an awkward wording on it, but the thing with that is it has 0 crit and only 1000 power, but when it attacks, it's destroying its target, which is wonderful. Next, we move on to the spells. Our first spell in the deck is Removal Voice. Counter, pay 1 gauge, call a size 1 or less Black Dragon from your drop zone by paying its call cost. Just really nice card for bringing back your monsters, and particularly for counter calling cards like this to destroy things on your opponent's turn. It's just fun shenanigans. Next, we have 4 copies of Black Dragon Shield. This deck really needs the life gain, and it really needs that extra defense, especially against rush decks, which it does not do very well against. So having shields in this deck are crucial. In some games, you just got to draw into your shields or you're going to lose, honestly. Next, to finish up our shield lineup, we also have 4 copies of Midnight Shadow. There are some other shields I could run, like Black Cloth Blade, but I don't really see a reason to. I think Midnight Shadow is the best option of what I have available. It's a nice, simple card that nullifies an attack if it's not a link attack. Next, we have 2 copies of Darkness Healing. This is a really fun card. It's cast cost: destroy a monster on your field. Counter, you gain 2 life. Then, if you have a Black Dragon set on your field, gain another 2 life. So the idea with it is it's a counter for the skill. So you wait till your opponent's going to destroy your monster anyways, counter destroyed essentially at no loss, and boom, you just gain 4 life. It's great. Plus, this can stop a lot of cards like impacts sometimes. It's fun. Then we have only 2 copies. Yes, only 2. The reason being I don't have any more. That's probably it. And I don't have room yet, but I do want to fit more copies of this card into the deck. We have 2 copies of Black Ritual. Cast cost: destroy a Black Dragon on your field. Put the top card of your deck into your gauge, gain 1 life, and draw 2 cards. hey, this is just straight up a better Dragon Emperor Legend, and it synergizes with your deck, with your cards that get you skills when they're destroyed. It's just a wonderful card. I love this card, and it's one of your big advantage gainers. Next, we move into our set spells, and each of the set spells themselves are 2-ofs in the deck, partially because you can toolbox them out with Zilla West. So we have Black Crest Conversion. At the beginning of your final phase, you may destroy a black dragon on your field. If you do, draw a card. This one I don't tend to use that often. However, I do use it sometimes when I desperately need that advantage to hopefully draw into a shield. Also, it can work with Abygale, and especially if I have something like a removal voice in my hand to just bring it back anyways, it can be very beneficial. Next, we have one of my favorite cards in the deck. We have Black Crest Volcano. At the end of your opponent's turn, if you have a black dragon monster on your field, put the top card of your deck into your gauge, gain 1 life, and draw a card. So the thing with this card is this essentially forces your opponent to destroy your monsters when they'd much rather be dealing damage to you. So you don't gain advantage to keep yourself going. It is an amazing pressure card, and honestly, a Dragon Emperor Legend at the end of each of your opponent's turns is fantastic. I love this card. Next, we have 2 copies of Invitation to Deathground. A very interesting card. I do not have a sideboard for this deck yet, but once I build one, there will be 2 more copies of this card in the sideboard because of how amazing of a card it is. Set. Your opponent cannot call monsters from the drop zone. That effect alone just shuts down many decks. There are some decks where it won't do anything to them. There are some decks, maybe Purgatory Knights, that it does a little bit to change up their strategy, but there are some decks that just can't function because of that, and I love that. Its second skill, Counter. Act. Choose a monster or item on your opponent's field and pay 2 gauge. If you do, rest the chosen card. So currently I don't use that skill very often, only when I'm desperate, because this deck really does not have much gauge gain right now. That may change in the future, but just having it as an option or a last resort is wonderful, and it's also great for matchups against, say, Thunder Empire. Then we move on to Impacts, and we have 4 copies of the deck's win condition. That way, Jacob. Jeez. 4 copies. And this here is Death Count Requiem. So you may only cast this card if you have a black dragon monster on your field. Believe it or not, I've actually failed because of that once or twice. Cast cost, pay 3 life. Set. This card remains on the field. Abilities of this card cannot be nullified. At the end of your opponent's turn, put the top card of your deck into this card's soul. Then, if there are 3 or more cards in this card's soul, you may choose, or put this card from your field into your drop zone, sorry. If you do, you win the game. This card scares people. The fact that once you set it, your opponent has 3 turns to kill you. They may go in for the rush, which can hurt, but you've got a lot of defensive options in this deck. And I find if I'm doing well enough to get this out on the field and keep a couple shields handy or a couple combo pieces, there's very little that my opponent can do to keep me from winning. Add in the fact that we're getting a new Abygale in the next set that essentially skips an opponent's turn while still adding a card to the soul. This is going to get very, very scary. And we have 1 more card in the deck, and this one, I'll admit, probably will not be in the deck for very long. I was kind of just play testing with it. This is Blood Dragon Ceremony Bloody Operate. It's an impact, pay 2 gauge, counter call Black Dragon monster from your drop zone by paying its call cost. Nice and simple. It's essentially the same as Removal Voice, with the 2 differences being the extra cost of 1 gauge, but you can call size 2s, and the fact that it's impact making it harder to nullify. But it's probably not that useful in this deck. All right, so that's my entire deck list. Let me know what you guys think about the deck. Say, hey, Jacob, you need to work on this, or what are you doing running that card at that number? Whatever you'd like to say. Or if you say, hey, that's a really good idea running that card, let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like this video, subscribe so you don't miss future Buddy Fight content. Let us know if there are any decks that you'd like to see a deck profile of. And check out our shop. The link is in the description below. And I will see you next time.